Hi, this is Julie Murphy with Arizona Farm Bureau. It's Friday and it's Talk to a Farmer, Talk to a Rancher, Talk to a Wine Grower, Winemaker Friday. We do this every Friday. We're going all over the state. We kind of got a little bit lucky, Greg, because you said, hey, I'm in Mesa and
Yeah, we can do it here.
just you can do it here. So I'm speaking today with Greg Gonnerman, who is a winemaker in the Cochise County area. And you're kind of new to me. There's several people in the wine industry that I know, but you came recommended to me by Emil Mullen from
Cove
Cove
Mesa.
Mesa.
Emil's a great guy.
Yeah. And so I'm delighted. That's why I'm going to spend a little bit more time on your bio so people will learn about you like I did.
Very good.
And what is it that you said? You were a wine hobbyist?
Yes, I was a hobby grape grower and winemaker who let his hobby get completely out of control. And here I am.
Yeah, so you're the owner and visionary behind Laramita, Cellars, and Chiricahua Ranch Vineyards, and you're located in the Willcox American Viticulture area, which is one of the three here in southeastern Arizona. Your journey into winemaking, as we just referred, began as a passionate hobbyist, evolving into a professional endeavor that has made you a respected figure in Arizona's burgeoning wine industry. And to me, the way the wine industry is going here in Arizona, it can do nothing but go up. So I'm quite excited about that. Originally, and this is the intriguing and fun part to me, is that you were an engineer and you also are a technical writer.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a lot of science behind winemaking. So
there is. Yeah.
So there's a fit there.
Exactly. I think there is. Many different people are attracted to grape growing and winemaking, but certainly you do find a fair number of engineers. I spent most of my adult life, practically all of my adult life, working in technology, and then one day decided, why not give this a try? Really, this is how this started. I always had an interest in wine. I was fascinated by the place that wine held in history and culture and religion.
Yeah.
And around 2006, I was attending wine tastings pretty regularly in Scottsdale and really got into it. I learned so much about wine and decided to start dabbling in home winemaking. Well, soon I started dabbling in backyard viticulture, and this is in Mesa, where it's
Right.
actually far too warm to be growing wine grapes. I soon ran out of room in my tiny backyard. I planted a few vines in a friend's yard, a few in a relative's yard. By 2012, I was not just making wine from the few grapes I could grow here in the lower deserts. I was also buying frozen grapes from California, fresh grapes occasionally from Arizona grape growers, and making more wine than I had places to store in my home. Every closet in my home was filled with vessels of carboys and small barrels of various types. And friends were asking me why I wasn't doing this as a business. And I said, it's too much work, too much worry, too much bureaucracy. I didn't want to mess with it. But at the end of the day, I wasn't happy with those answers. So I decided to pull the trigger on this. And this is mid-2012. I started looking for the property that would become my vineyard. And it took me 4 months. Now, there are, of course, 3 areas in Arizona that are very well suited for grape growing. The Verde Valley up north, Sonoy and Elgin down south, and then Willcox in the southeastern Arizona, Cochise County area. And I was attracted immediately to Willcox. Cost of land was a little less, and I felt like the growing conditions there were a little bit better, especially in the hills and foothills of the Chiricahuas and Dos Cabezas Mountains.
Right.
And that's really where I focused my search. And it took me almost 4 months to find the property that would become my vineyard. The vineyard is known, it's legally instantiated as Chiricahua Ranch Vineyards because I saw a need to sell grapes to other winemakers. I really didn't want them putting Laramita Cellars on their back label as a source of grapes. I thought that was a nice separation. So the vineyard and winery actually set up separately.
Okay. And heck, you kind of told it all there, so I may not go through all of this, but it's a 40-acre property in Willcox.
I currently have 13.5 acres in
vines.
Trying desperately to get up to 32 acres. Of course, we have the water situation right now. An AMA was declared. But I think I've made enough of an investment that I should be able to secure my water rights, my grandfathered water rights.
Good.
Only time will tell, though.
So then the most obvious question for me is what transitioned you from the engineer to, and I know you had the hobby, but
yeah, well, I think I found myself sitting in my beige cubicle under fluorescent lights doing some tasks that surely nobody would care about in the long term. I thought, there's got to be something more than this. So I think that was maybe the turning point for me. And
Okay.
I had this hobby going on, and I knew that there were some nice properties available in the Willcox area. I knew there was a potential for that. I thought I might be able to make a go of it. So I thought, what the hell? Why not?
Right.
See what can happen here. So that's the turning point. That's when I decided to start looking for a property.
But I have to say, earlier what you said about talking other people into planting some vines, you must have the power of persuasion as well.
Well, I think I've been inspired by the success others have experienced, and I hopefully maybe others have been inspired by the success I've experienced. And I learned so much really, and I feel like in many ways I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in this business. Um, I don't want to jump the gun. I know you're going to ask about grape varieties.
Go for it.
When I got started with this, when I decided to pull the trigger on this, one of the first things I did was I reached out to established grape growers and winemakers in Arizona. I asked two questions. I asked, if you were going to plant more vines, what would you plant? If you were going to buy grapes, what would you buy? And from them, I got some fantastic suggestions. Sam Pillsbury recommended Roussanne, Marsanne, and Viognier. Viognier was already on my list. I had not heard of Marsanne and Roussanne. I planted those, and those have done very well for me. Roussanne really loves southeastern Arizona. Marsanne does okay, but Roussanne is an absolute rock star. And we made some fantastic wines. Others recommended Vermentino. For example, Rob Hellman, formerly of Sand Reckoner, recommended Vermentino. And I got some other great suggestions as well. And so in that way, there's a direct way where I've really benefited from the experience of others. And in so many other ways, too, I mentioned Sam Pillsbury. Well, he was 10, 15 years earlier than the rest of us out there evangelizing on Arizona wine and introducing people to Arizona wine. And
Sam is great.
yeah, he really did a lot to sway opinions. And because I know when he was out there pouring wine at Costco and wine bars and wherever he could, um, many people were just turning up their noses at not even giving him a chance to pour the wine. They just assumed that you could not make good wine in Arizona. But
Yeah,
you can.
I even ran into it's a breakfast restaurant I go to often, and one of the waitresses there. So because I go there regularly, they always know me, and it was interesting because I mentioned wine, Arizona wine, and she said, "Oh, it's kind of hit and miss." And I said, "Actually, not at all." So unfortunately, there's still that perception. But if I did a real deep dive, I would assume that maybe those individuals that don't really know that much about it aren't wine connoisseurs themselves and haven't really discovered it.
Yeah, I think there's that, but also too, I think that there are some real, wine snobs, for the lack of a better term, who just assume they think about Arizona, they think about Sororo cactus, and they think it's too hot to grow wine there. But of course, in the higher deserts, we have nearly ideal growing conditions for most wine grape varieties.
Right. That's so very true. So there are 18 grape varieties planted in your area, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide which varieties to focus on for Laramita cellar wines versus selling to other winemakers? I mean, what's that symbiotic balance?
Anybody that's been in this business for any length of time will tell you that 18 is too many. It is a lot to manage, especially as harvest starts in August. Because you've got to carefully monitor each grape variety and make sure you're bringing each variety in at the best possible time at the peak of ripeness. And of course, that can also be tricky because of our monsoon weather, which is actually one of the very few complicating factors in growing grapes in Arizona, is we get rain sometimes when we don't want it. But my desire to have that many grape varieties stem from a need to keep the wine club happy. I think for any small winery, keeping your wine club engaged is vital, and you can't just have 5 or 6 wines twice a year for your club members and expect them to stay on board. You need to be able to bring something fresh into rotation every year, maybe a couple times a year, introduce them to something new. So also too, there was a desire to experiment, to see what grape varieties would work well for me at my location. And I've learned a lot. I've had very few issues with, I planted Movedra. Movedra was actually, the vines I got were on the wrong rootstock for my soil. I didn't realize that at the time. most European grape varieties, the ones that everybody knows and loves, Merlot, Chardonnay, etc., they're all generally grafted onto American hybrid rootstock. And my Mourvedre was on the wrong rootstock for my soil. It did not perform well. Also, some of those vines came straight from the nursery infected with the red blotch virus. The nursery in California didn't realize that they had an issue. And that's a virus that just kind of sucks the energy out of the vine. And I ended up giving up with Mourvedre. I think Mourvedre is a fantastic grape variety for Arizona, but in my particular case, those vines didn't work well for me, so I ripped them up. Tempranillo is one that has not performed well for me, so I pulled it up and replaced it with a Vermentino, a lesser-known Italian white that does very well for me. Very happy with Vermentino.
Wow. So explain, because as I was studying you and your background, you mentioned crop forcing. Explain for us that aren't growing grapes what crop forcing, that whole technique is, and you use it specifically for your Pinot Noir and how it helps achieve balanced flavors in this warm climate?
Exactly. So we only use, crop forcing is a technique for postponing fruit set and harvest later in the year. And generally, we're growing grape varieties here that belong here, grape varieties that do well here. The Italian reds, for example, Sangiovese, Montepulciano. I mentioned Vermentino and Italian white. These are grape varieties that do very well in Arizona, maybe better in Arizona than they do in Italy. But Pinot Noir is a grape variety that needs to be grown in a cooler climate. It needs a longer, slower ripening period. And that's important because Pinot Noir has a much different tannin profile. You have to get those tannins fully developed to get the best flavor, character, and color out of Pinot Noir. And that's the cool ripening period is important because you need time for those tannins to fully develop without the sugar climbing too quickly, without the acidity dropping too quickly. And by pushing fruit set later in the year, we're able to do that. Getting back to your question, what is it? Crop forcing is a multi-step pruning technique. It starts in the spring with us pulling all of the grape flowers off that would become grape clusters. This leaves the vines with nothing to do. Then in the third week, except to grow, and the third week of June, we go through, we hedge the vines back, and we prune them back like it's wintertime. We leave the vines totally denuded, stripped bare. They look like they've just been through their wintertime pruning. So you see the trunk and the cordons or the arms, and we even take all the suckers off the base. There's not a green leaf to be found. Again, we only do this on Pinot Noir. The vines respond to this by going through a week or 10 days of faux dormancy. Then they start growing again. This time we leave them alone. Now they start growing around July 1st, and in a good year, that's when we get our monsoon rains. And it's like springtime on steroids. The vines grow like crazy, produce a nice crop. And again, the important part of that equation, though, is not what's happening in the middle of summer. It's what's happening in October. So we're able to push harvest from, say, the first week of August back into the last week of October, maybe the first week of November. And we're able to produce a cool climate style Pinot Noir this way.
So you're only doing it on that one grape variety?
Only that one variety. And it only really makes sense. There's obviously a lot of expense here with labor, 2 rounds of pruning and pulling off all of the grape flowers. And yields suffer because of this. We're reducing yields. Pinot Noir, we can price a little bit higher to make up for that. But it really wouldn't, I don't think this process would work with any other grape variety, both from an economic point of view and from a practical harvest season standpoint. It works so well with Pinot in our climate because we're able to start new growth around the time we usually get our first summer rains, and we end within a week before our first frost. So this works ideally well in Willcox. People have asked me about doing this in Sonoyta or up in the Verde Valley, and I've recommended that they don't because the timing would not be right. Their seasons are a little bit shorter.
And you could avoid doing this with this grape variety, but it sounds like
there are some good Pinots being produced in Arizona, but I really think if you want to take it the next level, this is the way to do it.
Okay, I'm going to have to try that of your wines.
Yeah, and I would like to add that a friend of mine, back when in my hobby days, a friend and fellow home winemaker, Nathan Brugnon, is the one that introduced me to this. I've got to give him credit. It's not something I would have thought of had he not introduced me. He actually gave a presentation to our amateur winemaker club on this topic. That's how I was introduced to it.
So you've already alluded to some challenges about growing grapes in general, but what challenges have you encountered? You know, drill down, even if you've got specific stories on this, of growing grapes in Willcox, or just in general, being a wine grape grower here in Arizona.
Yeah.
The challenges of it.
So I do have one little story to share. My property, when I planted my first vines, the nearest vineyard was 3 miles away. I was out in the desert. Now I did put a game fence around my vineyard. I put chicken wire around the base of it, protecting against the threats that I knew about, the javelina, the deer, etc. But there was one threat that I didn't foresee, and that was leafcutter bees. When I got started, when I planted my first few acres of vines back in 2013, vines are planted in these waxed paper they're like a milk carton, basically, without a top or bottom, and that protects them from the wind and rabbits and whatever. But the vines started growing. All of them started growing. They looked wonderful, but as they emerged from that plant protector, the leaves were being stripped bare. And initially, I wasn't sure what was going on. And I was really getting worried because every single vine was being stripped bare as it emerged from the plant protector. But soon, I figured out what was going on as I was in the vineyard working, and I saw a leafcutter bee chewing a portion of a leaf, grabbing that portion of leaf and carrying it away with it. And that, in fact, was a leafcutter bee. And as I explored how to handle this situation, because it's not a threat that I'd ever dealt with my little hobby vineyards, nobody took me seriously because nobody had ever heard of leafcutter bees posing such a threat to a vineyard. I ended up using a variety of approaches. Kaolin clay mixed in water ended up being the best cure for this. And kaolin.
And you spray it on the leaves?
Yeah, you spray this slurry of this very liquid slurry of clay, this very fine refined clay product on the vines, and it makes them a bit like sandpaper. And it prevented the leafcutter bees from doing any more damage. That was the main strategy I used to get this under control. For a while there, I thought I was going to be out of business because I wasn't able to get this, for several weeks, I wasn't able to get this under control. And nobody had a good solution because nobody had dealt with this problem before.
Wow. But it's one of the eternal problems / challenges for farmers and crops is the whole pest infestation or attack. And in fact, we have some premier U of A extension people that have showed with integrated pest management, and you can actually reduce even some of the chemical application. That sounds like that was an organic application.
It was.
It was just a clay.
It was organic, and in fact, in this case, the organic solution was the best solution.
Yeah, but just understanding the cycles, not only of the plants, but of even the insects that would attack, and then wanting to protect beneficials. So
exactly.
These integrated pest management programs really help farmers.
Yes, and my vineyard is not organic, but I do lean as heavily in that direction as possible. And because of that, when you're in my vineyard mid-season, you'll see spiders and robber flies and praying mantis and ladybugs. And I think that's essential to maintain a healthy vineyard, is not to disturb the beneficial insects and spiders. Keep things under control. Let Mother Nature take care of the threats as much as possible.
So I have another fun question, just again, getting background on what you're doing. How has your collaboration with winemaker Rob Hamelman of San Reckoner Vineyards shaped the style and quality of Laramita's Cellars wine?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I got into this as a hobbyist, and without knowing it, I was following what some would describe as a new world style of winemaking, where in my kitchen, in my home as I'm making wine, as soon as I would see the yeast cells sediment settle to the bottom of the carboy, I would transfer them to a fresh carboy. I was racking more frequently. And this is a more oxidative style of winemaking. And some would say it's a new world style of winemaking. Rob, he was formally trained in winemaking, took classes in Australia, did an apprenticeship in France. And he has, I'd say, more of an old world style, more of a hands-off style. That let the wine set, let the wine set on the lees until there's an issue that needs to be remediated. And his style is more reductive, again, more of an old world style, I would say. And it's been interesting learning his technique, his style. He's also been bigger on native or indigenous fermentations. I generally prefer to use cultured lab, so-called lab strains. These are strains of yeast that have been identified in vineyards around the world, and wineries around the world have been propagated then in a lab setting. So they're not genetically modified. They are naturally occurring, but they're just propagated in a lab setting. And I find that the results with those are more consistent. So we kind of have our own thoughts on that as well. I'm willing to embrace new oak when I think it's appropriate. And I'm more pragmatic. I know the American palate likes wines that are more aromatic whites, big, bold, fruit-forward reds, sometimes a little bit of oak in certain wines, in certain contexts. Rob is I think his winemaking style is a bit more, he's looking to make more elegant, more delicate wines, more like in the French style.
So cool.
Yeah. So you see in my wine lineup, I think you'll see a little bit of his influence, a little bit of mine.
I'm going to go back to your hobby because, and that you were making your own wine in your home. I mean, that could have been a brewery. What inspired the wine? When you go to a restaurant or you just want to have a relaxed evening and you want to have a drink, have you always liked wine over beer or what?
It's
what
interesting.
Inspired that?
I would, in restaurants, I would then as now, I rarely order wine in restaurants because usually the selection is lacking. Unless it's a restaurant that has a fantastic selection of Arizona wine, then I'm going to go explore what they've got. But generally, a lot of restaurants, the selection is lacking. For me, again, the interest in wine stemmed from an interest in a fascination with the prominence that wine has held in culture, religion, history. But the wine making was more of a scientific endeavor, I'd say. I was more intrigued by the process of making wine and the chemistry of making wine. And it's an organic process, and yet there's all this chemistry you've got to figure out to make sure the wine is well balanced and shelf stable. So I thought that was interesting as well.
This question is off script too. I think you and I were talking before we started the live on this. People still have a lack or a sense a lot, of the fact that we have a very robust, burgeoning, growing wine industry here in Arizona using
Arizona grown grapes.
Yes, that are grown right here in Arizona. I encountered that with a waitress who said, yeah, that's kind of a hit and miss industry in our state. And I said, not at all. No. You need to try. You need to go to some of the tasting rooms. You need to try these amazing Arizona wines. And you also had it.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
Yeah, just last week I was up in the Verde Valley delivering a few cases to a special retailer up there. This is a small shop that sells primarily to tourists. And as I'm dropping off the wine, bringing my first few cases, I see the sole employee behind the counter is having a lively conversation with a couple of customers. They look to be tourists. And I came back in with the last of the order, and the tourists had already walked off. I asked the gal behind the counter, what was that about? That was a kind of a lively exchange. And she said they wouldn't believe me. She said they kept asking, where are the grapes grown for these Arizona wines? And she said, Arizona. And they didn't believe me.
That's
and fortunately, those people did come back in. They circled around and came back in that little shop. And I was still there, and I had an opportunity to engage with them. And I said, I heard you're asking about these Arizona wines. And I said, I make Laramita Cellars. These are my wines. I grow the grapes at elevation very close to where we are here, but in southeastern Arizona. And their mouths were agape, and they were in a mix of disbelief and surprise, I guess. But had a nice chat with them and brought them around, introduced them to the idea that you could grow wine grapes here. That is less of an issue. At least within Arizona, I think most serious wine drinkers in Arizona know that the high deserts of Arizona are nearly perfect for growing European grape varieties. But we still have a bit of an education challenge ahead of us to kind of bring the whole world around to that point of view.
Pausing for station identification. For those that are live with us, this is Talk to a Farmer, Talk to a Rancher, Talk to a Winemaker Friday. We do this every Friday morning. We're going all over the state. Because you live in Mesa, Greg, it was very convenient. You said, hey, well, I'll just drop by the Farm Bureau office. So we're actually here in the Farm Bureau office for one of these winemaking conversation series. And so now I'm going to get specific with some of your wines. and how they express the terroir, as we talk about. So, like the 2016 Rasan, I hope I'm saying that right, the 2017 Pinot Noir, they emphasize Arizona's terroir. What makes the Willcox AVA, or another, just for people to understand it, that's the Arizona viticulture area.
AVA is American Viticultural Area,
Yeah.
and Arizona does have 3. So the 2 varieties I think we talked about Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir does reflect our terroir, but of course the way that I produce it, it very much reflects the whole crop forcing technique, becoming more of a cool climate style than a warm climate style Pinot Noir. The 2 varieties I'd like to talk about are Viognier and Sangiovese.
Okay.
Viognier produces such lovely floral aromatic white wines when grown here, and contrast that with how that variety shows in other environments. Like I just had some guests at the vineyard a few weeks ago who were from back east, Virginia, I guess, and they're telling me about their experience with Viognier in Virginia, and they're saying that my Viognier was so much more aromatic, and in Virginia they're more reserved and more have brighter acidity, and they're just a different kind. And I said, yeah, that's our terroir. That's a result of the growing conditions, and in our soil, with our summer sun and our UV light, Viognier just produces these just robust, lovely, floral, aromatic whites. Sangiovese, among the reds, I think it's happier here in Arizona than it is in Italy. I'm going to upset somebody surely, but I've never had an Italian Sangiovese or Chianti that I really fell in love with. They're always so serious and so earthy and in Arizona, our Sangioveses are always so bright and fresh and fruity and fun and wonderful. In fact, we always have to blend. I feel it's necessary to blend a little something else into the Sangiovese to kind of ground it. Otherwise, it would just be too fun. So we've used Syrah in one year. We've used Sagrantino in several years for that purpose. Sagrantino is an obscure Italian red that I grow. It's one of the 18 varieties that I grow at my vineyard. But these a small percentage of one of those other reds will help ground that and make it into more serious Sangiovese.
I always remember what Eric Glomsky said, is that wine is about place. Mm-hmm. It truly is about place. And so maybe if we want to experience place or understand place, especially if we go on a hike somewhere where they're growing grapes, which is very conducive of a lot of our vineyards around here, go on the hike and then have a glass of wine.
I get a lot of guests that have just toured. They've driven through or hiked in the Chiricahuas, which are nearby. And I think that'd be a great way to spend a day. Come down, do some hiking, and then end it with a wine tasting at my place or somebody else's.
Yeah. What role does community engagement, like the vineyard tours, the wine festivals, play in your vision for what you're doing with Laramita Cellars and promoting Arizona's wine industry in general?
Yeah, well, as we've discussed, getting the word out about Arizona as a great place to grow wine is still something that we're all engaged in. We've got to bring around people who may still be skeptical. But so much so in this business, in the wine business, selling wine is about building relationships, either direct personal relationship with a distributor, a retailer, restaurant owner, or maybe a serious consumer, or in the more abstract situations like this where people can get to know me and get to know the winery. Via social media and the web. So engaging with people in one form or another is essential to my business plans, and it's important overall for the Arizona wine industry. And really, I found one of the best ways to sell wine, to market wine, is to get wine in somebody's glass, either at a charity event or a wine festival, or encourage someone to come out to my vineyard for a vineyard tour and tasting. That's how you engage with people. That's how you sell wine.
How can they connect with you and your wines, at least what you're doing?
Exactly. So the best way to reach out to me to find out more and maybe set up an appointment for a vineyard tour would be go to LaramitaCellars.com, LaramitaCellars.com, and go to the contact page, reach out to me that way. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah. And can we find some of your wine in some of the shops that sell Arizona wine?
Yes. Yeah. So my wines are available around the state. I sell nearly half my wine up in the Verde Valley at a number of specialty retailers up there. And we have this thing called Tied House Rules. I can't mention a single one, but I think I can mention everybody without violating state or federal law. Up in North Made in Arizona, Vino Zona, Vino de Sedona, Art of Wine, Park Plaza, possibly in Prescott, and also here Beckett's Table, F&B have been great supporters.
Great restaurants.
Great restaurants and great supporters of Arizona wine. And in Tucson, you'll find my wines all over the place. George's Wine Shop, Westbound Tap and Bottle, Arizona Wine Collective, and a few other places.
I mean, your hobby blew up.
It did. It got out of control.
But you don't regret any of it.
No
right?
regrets. No regrets.
No.
I don't want to go back to, I can't imagine my life without this endeavor.
Oh, that's awesome. And going back to community, I think even wine clubs can create that. Because maybe, I know a lot of that is, if I join your wine club, I'm assuming that you would send me a variety of wines.
Yeah, we have
once a month or something.
No, we have 3 tiers. We do deliveries like most Arizona wineries. We do the deliveries in the spring and the fall, and there are 3 tiers to my wine club. Pioneer is just 3 bottles in the spring, 3 in the fall.
Oh.
Territorial is the mid tier, 6 spring and the 6 in the fall, and then the 1880 Reserve is the top level. It's a case in the spring, a case in the fall.
So fun.
And as club members, you get discounts, you get access to library wines that are generally not available, invitations to special events. And go to our website to learn more about that.
Yeah, because to me the clubs, and because you have some of those events and you mention it to the clubs, that some of the club members can meet each other. That's why I'm thinking.
Yeah, it builds a sense of community.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Even that can still build a sense of community. But there was something that you said, what kind of wines that you might not get or you can't get normally?
Library wines.
Okay, so what's that?
A library wine is wine that's out of, now it's out of vintage. Typically, they're red wines. A few of them might be well-aging whites with potential to age well. So these are wines from past vintages. Special wines were set aside just for the wine club.
And most of our Arizona vineyards and winemakers, they have clubs.
Oh yes.
Similar, maybe different structures, but
yeah, different commitments, different benefits. But I think most small wineries around the country have their own wine clubs.
Okay. And your tasting room itself is still under construction?
Yeah, there's a whole epic saga. If anybody comes out to my vineyard, I will share with them the whole epic saga of getting the building and the tasting room constructed. But we can do vineyard tours and patio tasting by appointment, and I encourage people to reach out to me through our website to set that up.
But you're envisioning that it's enhancing your Laramita cellars and creating more experience for the visitors.
I found that this general approach, having people come out, do a quick vineyard tour, spend a little bit of time with me, I think that provides a unique experience. It's something you don't find, maybe 30 years ago in Napa, you could have that kind of experience, but today it's not. And I really want, as I get the tasting room complete, as I open up for regular hours, I still want to have the same type of experience, but having a nice finished tasting room to enjoy wine in would be a plus. So. And
you still live in Mesa.
Yes, I spend a lot of time on the road. I still have a toehold in my past life. I do a little bit of consulting work in engineering and tech writing. So I spend a lot of time on the highway. But
so how often are you? You're obviously back and forth. What, a couple times a week?
Yeah,
3 or 4 times.
Well, it's pretty. It can be pretty crazy. So during harvest season, I'm at the vineyard most of the time.
Okay.
So August, September, I'm there most of the time, and I can do some work remotely via computer. But the rest of the year, my time is split basically half. I'll spend half the week at the vineyard, half my time up here in the valley.
It sounds like it works out well.
It has been. I do have to have a little bit more help in the vineyard because of that. But fortunately, we were able to get good people in the Willcox area.
Any last insights, encouragement, especially for those wanting to try to get more sophisticated with their wine experiences with Arizona wine? Any final tips for someone that might set them on a course for some successful experiences with Arizona wine?
Well, if you want to learn more about Arizona wine, then definitely follow various Arizona wineries and the Arizona Wine Growers Association on Facebook and Instagram. That's the best way to stay informed about upcoming events. And the best way to learn about Arizona wine is to drink Arizona wine.
Yeah.
Look for festivals, look for charity events. Any time that anybody's going to be pouring samples of Arizona wine, that's a great opportunity to learn more.
Greg Gonnerman, thank you for this time. I know that I've stolen it from you, and you were gracious to give it to us. And I'm definitely going to try some of your wine.
Well, thanks for having me here. It's been a lot of fun.
Excellent. See you guys next week.